You're listening to the Desert Moon Hockey Podcast with Matt and Rich.
What is that, episode 43 of the Desert Moon Hockey Podcast? We have a small little PSA, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going to trash talk on Twitter, do not reply to a bunch of, like, OnlyFans or lewds or whatever on the main account, because it makes it easy to clown on you. That's it.
Yep. Especially when you have your real name and real photo on your Twitter account. Yeah. So what we're talking about, a little context here. We're just gonna hop right into this. There's somebody who's been clowning on the Coyotes, replying to them in all of their messages, and this person's using their real name, real photo, just replying to all the sexy girls on Twitter and giving them some fire comments under all their photos. All right.
Anyway. Just PSA, look, the incognito browser is your best friend. Have whatever fun you want. Just don't have it traced to you.
Yep.
All right, so we are in the season of L's, and honestly, I could not be happier. I mean, not for ASU. They lost both their games against, Minnesota State this weekend. I'm kind of annoyed by that. I'm a little annoyed that the women also lost today. I haven't been paying attention to the other D1, D2, D3 club teams or anything. Tucson, I think, split their series, but that's irrelevant right now, all right? Just so that way we can still technically say we cover the other teams. Let's talk about the Arizona Coyotes, the greatest tank on ice. And I have to be generic with it, but that certain individual that I talked to, you know who you are. You called the 8-game losing streak, but not only that, they are currently on a 9-game losing streak, or as I like to call it, a Bedard winning streak. I want to just very quickly, it starts off against the Tampa Bay Lightning 5-3 loss on New Year's Eve. Great way to bring in the new year, and I'm not even being ironic. I'm being dead serious. You lose to Florida 5-3, Philadelphia 6-2, 2-0 against Chicago in one of the greatest games I've ever had the pleasure of hearing about afterwards. 4-1 against Pittsburgh, 4-2 against San Jose, 5-3 against Ottawa, 2-1 back-to-back against Minnesota and Winnipeg. Finding ways to still get on the scoreboard, make games look a little interesting. Barrett Hayton's playing some of the best offensive hockey he's played at the NHL level.
Absolutely.
Great for him.
Yeah.
Krauser's burying some goals. It's good to see. Keller, Chikrin, they're getting their points. The guys that need to produce are producing. But they are winning in the standings because they went from a actual playoff spot.
Yep.
You know how optimistic I am.
Not just a playoff hopeful, an actual playoff spot.
A literal playoff spot. You know exactly how optimistic I am. I didn't even say playoffs this year. I said better than people expect, and I said improvement from last year overall. I did not say a playoff spot. But now they finally they grabbed the reins and they're like, you know what? We gave some exciting hockey.
World Juniors started. They started watching the World Juniors highlights, and they're like, "Oh man, you know what? Winning was fun and all, but when a kid puts up 24 points in 6 games, that's pretty damn good."
Put up 14 points, and we're excited about that. Still slowly making my way through my research. Still, other than Barrett Hayton, the best Coyotes performance at a World Juniors. Still got to look through another 20 years, but as of right now, still. And Connor Bedard made it look kind of benign. It made it look like it wasn't that impressive because of how good this kid is. Yep. And this is the best possible time because now you go up. They might beat Detroit on Tuesday. You're not beating Washington. They can never beat Dallas. They're not beating Vegas. Anaheim, you know what? Win that one. Win a little bit. You can have a couple wins this month.
That's one that you probably want to lose, though. Like, that is
they have
one.
2 games,
just because
they have one at home, one on the road. You can win one. It's not going to kill you as long as you split.
I guess that's fair.
St. Louis, they lose to that.
Split's fine. Yeah.
So it's like, you can get 2 wins this month, and I'm fine. Keep them within a couple of goals. I know you got blown out a couple of times, but for the most part, these are staying within a couple of goals. I'm fine with that. And we are back. I just want to, real quick, while we're up here, I want to look at the NHL standings because we are tanking and dropping, and this is the greatest tank on ice. This is the greatest tank ever produced, and I am a happy Coyotes fan. So let's do a league-wide ranking if this thing would like to load for me.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm gonna show off some swag that I got from the Coyotes game. So, of course, I got to show off what I got. I got my gym bag on, I think it was Tuesday. And then on Thursday, I got my free beanie. Pretty good stuff, man. The giveaways that they've been giving out has actually been really useful stuff. It's not just like oh great, it's a shaker bottle that's going to break after the first use. Like, it's actually some pretty good stuff. This beanie, this is like a legit beanie. And there's the bag, and they had the jerseys. They've had like a ton of good stuff. So respect to them for at least getting the fans interested to get to those games and, sell some tickets, I guess.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't know because I got my hand on one of the jerseys because it was covered in beer and left behind. I just grabbed it and said, "Screw it, I'll risk it. I'm grabbing this and I'll wash it."
Yeah,
I couldn't get one of the beanies or the bags. I'm trying. Now, no one likes me enough. Anyway, so the Coyotes went from, again, an actual literal playoff spot, and they've gone down and down and down. They are 29th overall. They are 3 points behind San Jose. All right, Montreal is 8 points ahead of them, Vancouver as well, and then Ottawa is like 10 points ahead of them. So as long as those teams keep winning more than the Coyotes do, we are set. We finally got behind those teams. But more impressively, as bad as Anaheim has been, we are 3 points ahead of them and Columbus.
Yep.
We are only 5 points ahead of Chicago. All right, as long as we can get behind Columbus minimum to get those top 3 odds, it makes the ability to win the draft lottery that much more realistic. And as long as, if they can get behind Anaheim, forget about it. If they can get behind Anaheim, I am fully on board with the let's rig this so that way Chicago doesn't win Bedard. All right, Chicago, look, you have 3 cups. You had a major controversy where you decided, hey, covering up sexual assault's pretty base, actually. So you know what? 5 years and no playoffs and no Connor Bedard, I think that's just karma. But if we can get behind Anaheim, it makes it that much more realistic that it happens. So I'm just saying, look, I'm tired of the fans at this point. I'm not talking about when they first started the rebuild and people were unsure. I'm talking about right now, knuckles deep in the rebuild.
Yeah.
Shut the hell up. We need to lose. We need these games to be done. We're keeping them within 1 or 2, but this team, tonight against Winnipeg, it was the most beautifully executed tank. About 9 minutes and some odd, 9 or 8 minutes and some change left in the second period. They recorded their 5th shot on goal.
Yeah.
Clayton Keller scored on it, by the way. But their 5th shot on goal, 12 or 10 minutes into the second, so it's more than halfway through the entire game. That is a perfectly executed tank. I am proud of these boys, all right?
Masterclass.
Look at the actual end goal. The end game here is the number 1 overall pick. I know last year, and I will admit it, and I will explain the difference, all right? Last year, you needed top 3. Shane Wright was a damn good prospect, but you also had Slavkovsky, you had Nemec, you had Logan Cooley, you had other guys that, in my opinion, were in different aspects going to be of pretty similar value, while Shane Wright was the one that at the time was the clear number 1. Now it's Uri Slavkovsky. Slav's looking pretty good. Shane Wright looked pretty good at the AHL level. Now he's going back over to the WHL. But Logan Cooley has also looked phenomenal. As of right now, at least in my opinion, the top four or so prospects, not one of them looks that much better than the other at this point right now. So it's like, yeah, that draft, that was fine. It was a deep enough draft, some pretty good value in the 2022 draft. Yep. 2023 is that, but on cocaine. But any drug, illicit substance you want, that's what this draft is. And yes, Mitchkov would be phenomenal. Fantilli, I really want Fantilli, by the way, would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the difference between, let's say, Slavkovsky at number 1 and Cooley at number 3, as of right now, and in my opinion, throughout the rest of their career, is just not going to be that great. Doesn't mean Slav's not the better player, not what I'm saying, but the overall value. Between Fantilli and Bedard, it's not even a contest. Yep. It is literally not even in the same stratosphere. This is if you want to tank any year, you want to be the worst team in the league, this is the year to do it. And I hope the Coyotes are the second ever team to finish 32nd, because if we get Bedard as early as next year, there will be a couple flirts with playoff spots. Doesn't mean they make it, but they made a playoff spot this year at one point. They'll flirt with it a little bit if we get Bedard. That's how good that kid is. And even if it takes him 2 years, look at what Jack Hughes is doing now. After a couple of years, he's on pace to be the first ever 50-goal scorer and 100-point scorer in New Jersey Devils history. If Bedard is supposed to be better than that, the Coyotes can have the first ever generational talent this franchise will ever see. Love Donor.
Yep.
Love Kachuk. Don't really have any love for Roenick anymore. You guys know that. I'll always stand Peter Mueller, but that one was a bust. I'll be honest there. But McCulloch,
to be fair,
Hansel, Bodker, those guys were good. We have never had a Bedard.
To be fair, Mueller was good. He just got injured. Let's be fair with Mueller.
Injured and had
it wasn't
coaching.
a bust. It wasn't a bust. He got injured. But yeah, nothing
Wait,
even
you're Australian
remotely.
champion. You're Australian champion. Peter
Australian
Mueller. He wasn't a
champion,
bust, the champion.
True. But yeah, the Coyotes have never seen a talent like Connor Bedard if they were to land a guy like that, even remotely close to this franchise. So absolutely, I do want to say, before we go too far off here, I got to e-bag real quick, okay? So
e-bag, shame. I need a cowbell for Richie's e-bag.
Yes. If you are enjoying what you're listening to here on the Desert Moon Hockey podcast, please give us a like, a follow, a subscription on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And if you're listening to us audibly, make sure to check us out on YouTube, where you can find the video version of this podcast. And a podcast, shall I say, that is also has my audio this time. There's a reason why this podcast is coming out on a Monday instead of a Sunday. We may or may not be recording this a second time. And you want to talk about tanking and taking some L's. Richard took some L's because he forgot to record his audio, apparently, when he was, recording the podcast. So, oops.
Nobody cares, Richie. They're here for the rides. They're here for the 80s ride going on.
They're here for the stash. They're here for the stash.
Anyway, we got a big topic that was literally an hour and 10 minutes last time we talked about it. Saturday night, recording it Sunday night, so last night. But I do want to bring this up because I'm a man of my word. I said I will highlight this to Richie, and hopefully we'll make it a segment. Here's your segment. So, Jordino876 commented on the last episode, the Golden Gunner episode. Now that we're halfway point of the season, can you talk a little bit about the contract situation with the team as it stands next year? They're just shy of about $20 million to get back to the cap floor. Yada yada yada. I ain't reading all that because I have a terrible attention span. But you want contract talk? We got you, Giordano876. Please tell me I got the last three numbers right. So let's jump into it. We're going to be as quick as possible with the shorter stuff. I do, however, while we're getting started, want to get the list for the 2023 NHL UFAs up because that was also a pretty good part of the conversation. So stick around because this is going to get is Bo Horvat coming to Arizona?
Bo Horvat to Arizona confirmed? Question mark, exclamation point. I know that's how we're going to start off this topic here.
You should, straight up. All right, so let's start off with goaltending. We're going to start off with goaltending. You guys know my opinion on Karel Vejmelka. He's 26 years old, 2 more years left. He hit that second gear. Everyone is not playing well right now, but even his numbers haven't gone down that much as you would expect. They still have gone down. He's not a top 5 or 10 or whatever it was anymore in goals saved above expected, but he was up there for a long time on a team that wasn't very good. So at 26, I've said it multiple times when it comes to goaltending. It's one of the hardest positions to really be able to predict. And the best goaltender right now won't even be in the league in 3 to 5 years. That's how weird it is. If you get 2 seconds, someone offers me 2 seconds for Karel Vejmelka right now for that extra 2 years, like, look, I'm taking it because goaltending is the piece you can get last. Look at Darcy Kemper. We got a first-round pick for him, and he had a down year. He still won a cup and still got a 5-year contract after that. It's one of those things where I'm like, look, you can get that last. Worry about it last. I love Karel Vejmelka. You want to keep him here to the end of that contract, do it. I'm just not convinced he's the guy that when he's going to be, 28, 29 years old, that you want to give that 5-6 year contract to. That's why I'm like, if you can get 2 seconds, take it. Acquire a guy like Joey Decord. Acquire someone else. You can just, hey, you're going to play with Ingram. You can bring up Prosvetov. You can do a 3-goalie system. You're already running 11-7. All right, bring up a third goaltender. Screw it, why not? Screw it. Anyway, but Ingram, so yeah, Vejmelka, if you can get rid of him, yes. If not, I do not mind him staying here. I do like Karel Vejmelka. I'm just looking at it from an asset point of view. Connor Ingram, I think we both agreed. You kick the can, you give him the 1 year extension. What was it, like a 1-by-1, or was it a little under $1 million we agreed on?
Yeah, something like that. It's not going to be much. Just kick the can down the road. Young goalie, still learning the league. I mean, I say young, he's only a year younger than Vejmelka,
Yeah,
but
a year younger than Karel Vejmelka.
But even still, those two goalies, that's young by NHL standards when you're talking about goaltenders. So, I would say just kick the can down the road. It is what it is. He's looked a little bit better with his starts. Obviously the team's still losing, but from where he started his first couple of games as a Coyote to where he is now, he's looked a little bit more stable, less shaky, a little less like worrisome. I don't know how to explain it. Like, he hasn't been sliding too far out of the net and stuff like he was when he first came here.
Yeah, so keeping him for 1 more year, I don't see that as an issue. I really don't. Now, if we look at the goaltenders down in the system, you got Gillies, Prosvetov, Tendick, and Thornton. Thornton's got 2 more years. He's looked pretty good, like in the training camps. You're probably going to keep him around when it comes down to it, and he'll be, 22 when that contract's up? He probably goes to Tucson next year. So
yeah.
You have that pretty much covered. David Tendick, I don't really know where he projects. He played okay in the ECHL. He's decent as a backup level in the AHL. Don't expect too much from him. Maybe you bring back Gillies, maybe you don't. He's been okay. Ivan Prosvetov, I think you probably give him a 1-by-1. You give him that $1 million extension. Hey, you're going to come up be the backup next year. Because I still think he's good. I still think this goaltender can be good. I think he's played pretty well in the AHL this year. He just needs more NHL games against teams that aren't the defending Stanley Cup champion or the Stanley Cup champion that season, where he actually had a really good game against Colorado. But still, I think he'll be fine. I need him to come up and actually get the opportunity to play in a few games that aren't just, okay, well, you're going to play in 1 game, get thrown to the Wolves, and go right back down, Ivan. Have fun.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's probably what we're going to see with the goaltenders. I don't expect us to make a big splash for a goaltender in the UFA market. Unless you win Bedard and you're like, F it, let's
Bill's still,
turn this thing
he's still
around.
Way too cautious and way too smart about it. Even if we get Bedard, you might see a decent, smaller UFA, pool this year than last year. And Bukestad's looked pretty good. Stetcher's been pretty good. We've had some pretty good turnouts so far. But you're not going to get, oh, hey, we're getting Taves and Kane. You're not going to get that big of a splash. But I wouldn't mind, even if they pull the trigger on that Bobrovsky trade. If they ever get around to that, and that's actual, hey, we need to get out from under this contract. Okay, well, we'll have Sergei. He's not a bad goaltender. And also, if we get Bedard next year, we don't need to tank anymore. You're still not going to be a playoff team yet, but you no longer need to tank. Therefore, you actually can make a couple of improvements like that. So that's the only thing I really see happening. Or a 1-year UFA guy that's going to come in, hey, we need an extra NHL-level goaltender. That's all I really see happening. All right, defensemen.
Yep.
I guess we could take a peek at what's down in Tucson. We have Cam Crotty, Ronald Knott, and Cam Dineen. Dineen's 24, Crotty's 23. I think Crotty's been okay. He's ending his ELC after this. You probably give him a 1 or 2 year, 2-way deal, AHL level deal. I see him keeping him around, but he does have arbitration rights. Cam Dineen, same thing with a Dyson Mayo. They're probably going to keep kicking that can a year or 2 down the line, just keep him in Tucson to have semi-pro, pro-level players down there. And then Ronald Knott, I have no idea. They brought him in, I'm assuming, to be a little extra depth, but they haven't really needed him at the NHL level. Therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if he went back overseas.
Yeah, that's what I would suspect is that he'll probably just head back over. I mean, he's only making, $70K a year or whatever, whereas he can probably make close to 100, maybe 120 over in Europe. So I wouldn't surprise me if he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to head back over, or somebody else signs him, which I doubt. It'll probably be go back overseas. Yeah, I mean, AHL, there's really nothing too crazy to look at. But as for the NHL, there is going to be quite a bit of turnover.
Let's start off with Moser real quick. Before we get into the turnover, I want to get this one out of the way because he has exceeded all expectations. I brought up his stats last time, so we're going to do the exact same song and dance, but you'll be hearing it for the first time. Last year, 43 games. He was an overager, a second-round pick, I guarantee other teams would have been interested around the 4th or 5th round, but because he was that overager, we don't know if we could take him. 43 games, 4 goals, 11 assists, 15 points, only a -10 on a very, very bad team. That was a bad team last year. This year in 42 games, 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points. He's on pace to basically double it, around 30, maybe 35. Maybe if he gets on a bit of a tear, he can get 40 points. Meaning he's probably going to be anywhere between a 30 to maybe career high 50-point scorer throughout his career. That's a guy that, with how insanely talented he is in the defensive zone, I'm talking about hockey IQ, body positioning, knowing where to be, forcing turnovers, really good defensive play. He is every bit as good as, at least when I really focus in on him, as a guy like McCulloch or Jean-Marcin could be in their own zone. Like this is a really good defensive guy that can also move the puck around well.
So with what you're talking about him, he's only got 2 years left. What would your opinions be for handing a contract to a guy like this?
I think he is your first pair defenseman, unless Lamoureux comes in and blows out of the water and there's another prospect that takes his job, which I don't see. JJ Moser as an overage rookie that no one really expected much except for me and Kyle Pereira, but no one really expected much, is literally stolen a top 4 spot, and you cannot move him off of that spot. With how good Ghost has been, how good Chychrun's been, he's still a top 4 defenseman. He's 22. By the end of this, he'll be 24 will be the first year of the 24-25 season. I'd give him a 6-year contract. I would, if I can get him for a 6x5, as long as the points keep coming, because you also have to provide that depth point scoring, because with how well he moves the puck around, I think he can easily, again, be between 30 to career year 50-point scorer. So probably, 35 to 40, 42 points a year. That's not bad at all. I think that would provide great value defensively as well for about
fast,
$5 million a year.
Makes a good first pass. Makes a good first pass, can shut down guys really well on people breaking into the zone. I really wouldn't be surprised to see JJ Moser after that ELC potentially get a kind of a Jacob Chychrun contract. Kind of a
Chychrun got a 6x4.6, didn't he? That's a great cap hit for Chychrun. I still hated when that was signed because he hadn't played a game yet. It was before his first game of that season, but boy, did that actually work out with flying colors. That was a phenomenal contract. It was one of only a couple of good contracts that Chaika signed. Keller being the other one, and every other one's been either mediocre or kind of bad. Alex Goligoski.
Yeah. Yeah, the money wasn't terrible for Goose, but the term was just too long. It was just
1 or 2 years shorter. That's a phenomenal contract.
Yeah,
just 1 or 2 years shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next guy on this list, I'm gonna go with just above him, Troy Stecher, 1.25 UFA after this year. I don't expect Stecher to stay on this team by a trade deadline. I could see a contender picking him up as a 6th or 7th defenseman. It's not going to cost you much, maybe a 5th, a 6th, something in there. I absolutely can see him being moved on to a contender.
He's played well. He's played well defensively. He's okay at moving the puck, but he pretty much has come in and it's like, I'm a defenseman. I'm going to play that defense. Not quite shut down, but still talented. No, maybe a 4th round pick. You could probably get a 4th rounder for him. That's still... You're turning nothing into something.
Yeah. I doubt it'd be a 4th. The points are just not there, but, anything for nothing is perfectly acceptable for the Coyotes.
What did Tampa Bay pay a 1st-round draft pick for a few years ago? The market is wonky when it comes to certain role guys because the teams at the very top will sometimes overpay. But now I don't think Stecher is going to be the guy that the top 2 teams or whatever. I don't think Boston's looking at him, but you could probably get a 4th rounder for him because it's still an NHL level defenseman that can come in. He gives you extra depth for injury. He's playing very well defensively. I don't really know how the advanced metrics look, but at least the eye test is there. And he's also eating up some minutes. But I don't see him coming back. 28 years old. I also think it's probably time to get a 1 or 2 extra of the kids to come up next year because this defense is going to look very different. Even just at the trade deadline, the top 2 players, Ghost, he's not coming back. I would love for him to do a Vermette where they trade him, he wins a cup and comes back. 29 years old, no more than a 5-year contract if they did it, and they would be a contender by the end of that. So depending on how you cost control, I'd prefer it to be like a 4x4 probably sounds a lot better. If you
I would.
He's probably not taking that.
I would say so. I doubt he'd do this, but I would absolutely do, maybe like a 5x3. Like, give him a lot of money. Yeah. This team doesn't. They need to give cap space to somebody, right? Yeah. 5x3 that gives you $15 million in Gossesbear's pocket. That's pretty damn good. And then at the other end for the Coyotes, that 3 years it lines up really well with. I've said this numerous times, that lines up perfectly when Cooley needs a contract, when whoever we draft with this pick this year needs a contract. Those guys are going to need that contract in 3 years. And if they blow up to Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, now you have that flexibility because $5 million is coming off your cap space at that same time when they need the contract. So,
and if it's a 5-year contract, you have $6 million over 2 years to get rid of. And if Ghost is still playing well, you can get rid of it. And if not, or if Ghost is still playing well, you don't want to get rid of him, then you still have a top 4 defenseman for a very cost-controlled number. I don't see it happening, but I would love that to happen. Because that would be a really smart move. And I know it's very eerily similar to the Goligoski contract, but at the same time, if it's a slightly lower cap hit, you could also work with it a little better, especially with the cap. It's going to be up in 5 years. Like, it's going to be very much up in 5 years. I hate the idea of, we'll sign the contract now because next year it goes up. But no, if you sign the contract now and if you're pacing it out over the next 5 years it goes up, that makes a lot more logical sense. Because when Chaika left and Bill Armstrong had his first year here, what cap space did they have? And they let Hall go. They had, no cap space for anything, letting one of their best players go. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we can get Tyler Pitlick. And that's our big free agent acquisition. So it kind of shows that you got to be able to pace these things out. I would love it. Don't know if he does it, but even I would do it in a heartbeat. I would absolutely do that in a heartbeat. But when both of them are gone, you're gonna have to have maybe Soderstrom comes up and gets a big NHL stint at the end of the year. At that point, you're still gonna have Nemeth and Brown, who's been a surprisingly good defensive pairing. They'll be here through the deadline. They'll probably get moved next year. But even then, Nemeth and Brown, I also wouldn't mind extending them at the end of these contracts one more year, depending on what the rookies are up here, because they've been pretty good NHL defensemen that have been, again, a surprisingly good pair. That they can probably help kind of get these kids where you want them. So there's some value there, but we're going to kick that can down the road because he probably, if they do that, that would be next year or they're getting dealt at the deadline. And then you have Valimaki, who's the interesting one, who's the one that the second he started playing this year, the defense just looked different. They started playing better, and it's so weird
lot
to
better
describe,
on the breakout passes.
Explain.
The breakout passes look way better the second he popped into the lineup.
24 years old. He has had some injury issues, but he's played well so far. And thankfully, I'm gonna not knock too loud so my dogs don't bark. But a little knock on wood here. Nothing else comes up, but 38 games, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points. He's probably going to be around a 20 to 30 point score, actually 30, 35 point score throughout his career.
Yeah,
I would not mind giving him, hey, we're going to keep you around for 5 years. But with the injury concerns, with wanting to make sure that you have flexibility, because when these kids come up and they're ready, you want to let them play. When they're not ready, you want to have guys that could be a roadblock. I say you probably do a 2-3 year smaller contract. Keep him around. He gets a pay raise. He's at 1.5 now, so maybe a $2 million a year, maybe somewhere around there, 2.25. He'll get a raise, but they're probably going to play it very conservative and try to give him a smaller extension unless he commands value at the deadline this year.
Yeah, to me, he looks like he's kind of a guy that you're going to pair with JJ Moser for a few years. They seem to click pretty well together. That pairing's pretty fun. And, you have that RFA year. He's 24. You have one more RFA year after this. I would say you probably just do a 1 year, at maybe $2 million. That's a $500,000 bump. He's at 1.5 currently. So a $2 million 1 year contract. It's kind of a show me that you deserve a multi-year contract with us. And you still have arbitration rights with him to get, whatever needs to be done.
So yeah, it's probably going to be a shorter term contract, or because he's been playing well. I don't know what teams could or might have interest because oh hey, he'll be 25 next year. That's a guy that he might be able to slot in for us. We can get him pretty cheap on a 3 to 5 year contract depending on what that individual team's long term plans are. So there could be someone knocking. There could be someone offer like a 3rd round pick or something, which again would just be flipping a nothing asset into something, which you could complain about. But I would like to keep Valimaki here. I think it would benefit the Coyotes more to keep him than it would to just move on from him.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think he's an asset that you can hold on to for a little bit, and it also keeps Soderstrom from being put into a situation that he rightfully doesn't deserve to be in right now. He's got to earn it.
He is getting a little better at the AHL level, but it's the AHL game and NHL game are still different. So it's one of those things where he'll have to come up this year and have a stint and really see where he's at. And we won't know anything until then. So what could it hurt? Like, worst case scenario, they sign Valimaki to a 1-year extension tomorrow. All right? They sign him to a 1-year extension, and someone else gets hurt. Soderstrom comes up and starts playing, and he plays very well. Oh, well, Valimaki then could be an odd man out. Or, hey, we don't have to get another defenseman. Soderstrom's ready this year, so it makes it a little easier to go back to a 12-6 and not have to burn your defenseman as much as they are right now. So there would be some benefits there. So it's kind of, why not at least give him the 1 year? Because you could still move it if you really needed to,
Yep. All right. Let's move on to forwards.
Anyone let's do it quick for AHL, just real quick. So Jan Yannick, 22 years old, with the kind of prospects coming up. We talked about it briefly on the previous recording. He kind of seen as an odd man out, and with how bad his NHL game was this year, he's playing well in Tucson, but he's not blowing it up. He's just playing well.
Yep.
That's the guy you might give a 1 or 2 year extension at a 2-way deal, or you might just kick it 1 year and see what happens. But NHL prospects for Jan Yannick, as promising as they looked to me last year, they don't look promising anymore. And it happens up and down, but you probably kick that can down a year, 1 more year. Dauphin, you could probably get him back for Tucson next year. Amama, same thing. Carcone, unless there is an NHL level interest for him, which he might go the Michael Bunting route, you can get him probably back for another year, even though I would prefer him to be up in the NHL. Again, I have nothing against Liam O'Brien specifically as a person. I would just prefer to have Carcone in his slot.
Yeah.
So I feel like
that's two guys that you can kind of slot in as that extra forward and just swap between depending on whether a team is heavy or skilled that night, or what weapon you decide to pick. They can kind of switch off. O'Brien's not really the offensive gifted player, but he can be physically demanding, whereas Carcone can be the opposite. And it's not like Carcone's at a time in his life where he still needs to develop. He's 26. He's about to be a UFA. Give him the NHL money. He's a healthy scratch most nights, and that's fine. He doesn't need to learn and develop. He needs to be in the NHL, and he needs to get some games in the NHL. I think that's
shot.
Yeah, I think that's the
NHL shot.
I think that's what he needs to be at this point, is an extra forward, healthy scratch, and just giving him time after time to allow him to get up to NHL speed.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree, and I think he should be in the NHL. I know he's playing very well for Tucson. As per usual, Tucson's trash. Every single year.
I don't know how they start strong.
They start strong. It's mediocre in November, and then the wheels fall out in December and January. So I'm like, look, I don't even know anymore. They changed their coaching. Maybe they got to change other things about the Roadrunners. I have no idea, but they obviously are not pushing for a playoff spot. They're not going to be this year. At that point, like, my biggest thing whenever the Coyotes would bring up random guys, like in, let's say, 2019 or 2020, whatever, and it's like they're just bringing them up to have an extra forward, and then Tucson needed those guys and they were going for a playoff push, it drove me crazy because I'm like, Tucson needs these guys. They need, like, they're in a playoff push right now. Give them their best players. Oh, well, the NHL comes first, which is the dumbest thing. Not because it doesn't make sense, but because the NHL did not need those players. They just needed a skater. So why not bring up a guy that is is not going to play. So bring up a guy that's like a bottom sixer in the AHL. They don't need someone else can slot up in there to replace them. Why are you taking a top sixer when that's someone they need right now? So Tucson's not in that position. I say bring him up for the rest of the year. Now, Ryan McGregor, I don't have opinions on him. You probably kick the can. He's been okay.
Yeah.
Again, no negative opinion.
There's a lot of can kicking on this team, including a guy who I'm a little disappointed in. That's Nate Smith. He
looked good. 4 points in 10 games last year, and then like this. The rookie camp to the training camp, we talked about it. Well, I thought both him and McBain were going to be 20-goal scorers. And while I do agree with you, I stand by it, Smith is probably the better offensive player. McBain was 100% willing to take that bottom six role, and he's thriving at it. That's a guy that's earned that NHL spot because he's doing exactly what they need him. Where, in my opinion, Smith, 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points in 35 games, not bad. That is not bad production. But he should be dominating down there. 24-year-old guy that looked good in his stint in the NHL last year, looked like he was tearing it up throughout camp. He should be blowing up the AHL right now. He should be top 25 in scoring down there. I honestly believe that. And
he screams a guy that when Bukestad gets traded would absolutely fill that role with Michelli and Krause. I don't know why. I think that's just a line. I just think that's a line that could absolutely work out for the Coyotes. I don't think he's a bottom six player. I don't think he's going to do well in a bottom six role. I think that he needs something in the top six, or at least like a scoring third line, something in that nature to where he can show his offensive prowess.
But my only issue is, while I agree on that wholeheartedly, where has it been in Tucson? Because again, I know it's the always hungry league, but you have a mix of guys that are NHL burnouts that desperately want to go back. You have kids that are developing that know that they're not quite there, but they want to go to the NHL. And you have guys that are career AHLers that still want to make sure they have jobs. You always have people that are playing well down there that are hungry. I just think that Smith, with how good he is, I don't think he's bad by any stretch. He should be dominating. And I feel like he could be a player that he came here because he wanted time. And with how some of these kids are coming up, Geeky's looked great this year. Cooley's looked phenomenal this year. I think at least one of those two is on the NHL roster next season. I don't know if it's just for a small stint. Oh, hey, you let Cooley come up for a little bit, and then maybe he goes to the AHL since he went the college route, not the CHL route. Mm-hmm. But I don't see where he would fit in, kind of like a Yan Yannick, to where I look at it like it's entirely possible he can realize that and ask to be moved somewhere else. In all likelihood, he probably signs a 1-year extension because he's still an RFA. I think he has arbitration rights. So maybe you kick that can, you work on a trade, or next year he comes out just looking... I hope he looks pissed. I hope next year you have a Nathan Smith that can score 20 goals, 25 goals in the AHL level, because I can see it. He's a good player. But... he hasn't showed it this year. It's just been pretty decent play. And again, you can't get mad at that, but you can't take that to the bank.
And for those that didn't really watch him that well last year or just forgot, he's very tenacious. He's a very tenacious type player, very similar to a Connor Garland, and he has the ability to also play center for you. So that's somebody that you could absolutely lean on, and I think can thrive in the NHL given the right circumstances. So let's move on to some NHLers. Yeah.
So let's get the easy one out of the way. Nick Ritchie, the scoring has kind of fallen off. He's not going to be here next year anyway. The only way you keep Ritchie, and the timeline doesn't work anyway because he's 27 years old, is if someone gives you a lot for Lawson Krause. And Lawson Krause is not on the market, but BA is not the kind of guy that's not going to listen to a phone call. So if you gave him here's a first and a good prospect, Lawson Krause is gone. But because Krause and Ritchie fill very similar roles, and with Krause really just playing well with Bukestad and usually Michelli, but now it's Gunther, and that line still is playing pretty well together, he is the odd man out. He's kind of struggled. You mentioned he lost his power play time because you really want to show off Jacob Chikrin. You're like, hey, he's still really good. Give us our 3 first-round assets, and he's yours. So he doesn't really fit anywhere anymore unless you move on from Krause, which you're not doing because at 25 years old, he'll be the perfect age at the like right in that prime when we're competing for cups. And
Yep.
I don't want yes, there's a little bit of risk with power forwards, but he also has a good amount of skill as well to where this ends when he's 30 years old.
He also hasn't
able to make your informed decision.
He hasn't been playing nearly the heavy minutes that a normal power forward receives either. He was a guy who bounced between the AHL and the NHL for a little bit in the beginning of his career. He hasn't really had too many injury problems, knock on wood. I know he did get injured last year, but it was like minor things like a hand or a wrist injury. Like these aren't injuries that are like serious for power forwards. When you're looking at serious power forward injuries, you're talking about lower body injuries. That is where the hard miles come in.
Martin Hansen, God forbid.
Backs, things like that. Those are the things that you worry about with a power forward. And so far, knock on wood, he has not had problems like that. And I still think there's a lot in that tank. I don't think we're approaching empty anytime soon with that power forward tank.
And again, unless someone comes up, here's a first and a really good prospect, he's not moving. I know Leafs fans, for whatever reason, will just throw him in as like an add-on on like Chychrun trade. Like it isn't just on the bad GM or bad armchair GM trades Twitter account. It's literally like just in the wild. Someone's like, "Oh, it's like
here's my garbage."
Like, is Toronto, gonna get Chychrun? And it's like, yeah, I'd also like him to throw in Lawson Krause too. I'm like, what do you mean throw in? He's on pace for still like what 25, almost 30 goals. He's still on pace for a damn good season.
Yeah, he's got.
You want him
16?
as a throw-in?
Yeah, he's got 16 goals so far. Like, and it's insane to me that people think like, oh yeah, he's just like a nothing piece just to throw in, and it's crazy. I also don't think people realize how much money he's making now either. Like, how are you going to make that cap space work?
That's about $9 million. You'd have to trade us William Nylander and some stuff to make that work. And look, if you're fine with that, I like Nylander. I don't think it. Literally, if you were to tell any Coyotes fan right now, would you take a Nylander for Krause 1-for-1? Do you think they'd say yes?
Probably.
Because that's again, I love Krause. He's not on the market. I'm not pushing for him to be traded. I'm just talking hypotheticals. I wouldn't mind that because that would be an upgrade. William Nylander's a good player. I think it's a little more cap we'd be taking on, but it is what it is. But that's not just a throw-in. That's a guy you have to actually swap something out. But or we'll talk Edmonton. Oh, hey, take Tyson Barrie, who, yes, all these points, great. He's like 3 years older than Chychrun, or 3 or 4 years. And on top of that, you're not going to get the same value. So it's like, oh yeah, we're essentially giving you an older Chychrun. Okay, we can't use that. By the time it's time for us to compete, he'll be in his 30s.
And he'll be a UFA.
What are we going to do with this player? Yeah, UFA. What are we going to do with this player? It doesn't work. It's stupid. I give us Broberg and or Bourgault. Screw it.
Yeah, Tyson Barrie is not a first-round asset that the Coyotes are looking for. They're asking for 3 good first-round assets, not Mimi assets that you just want to throw away.
Like, if they were looking for a playoff spot, like, if the Coyotes were looking for a playoff run and Chychrun still said, no, I don't want to be here, yes, it makes sense. It's still a downgrade. I'd still want better pieces coming back here, but that would make some degree of sense. But we're not pushing for a playoff spot. He doesn't provide that value where it's like, he's a middling, mid-20s guy we can flip later. He's literally late 20s, about to be 30.
Yep. All right, let's see who else we got here. So
Christian
Nick,
Fisher. So
Nick
Fisher.
I do want to say, hold on, before we go to Fishy.
Go ahead.
Nick Ritchie, I could see getting moved at the deadline with a 50% retainment from
that wouldn't bug me at all. I would take that
GMBA.
retainment.
Yeah,
I think that's fine, honestly.
Yep.
And you might retain on Ghost. You don't retain on Chychrun. Like Chychrun, that's a good cap hit anyway. But you retain on Ghost and Richie, and with that Richie retainment, you might even be able to talk someone into a second. But that also would be a bit of a hard negotiation, depending on where he's going. So probably a third, but you might be able to finagle or maybe even get a second, third thrown in there. And 2/3 can be traded up for a second round pick. No matter what, again, that's still free assets.
It could be.
He was a throw-in, wasn't he? On a Toronto trade?
Yeah, he could be a guy who you could see that gets like one of those seconds that's like 10 years from now. So that's probably what we'll end up seeing with him.
What was that trade again? Where he was...
It was the Labushkin trade. So he went with Labushkin.
That's right.
And the other guy who we had, Dzingel, right? And
yeah,
then they waived
Dzingel.
Dzingel.
Injury problems, and then they immediately got rid of him. And then Labushkin goes immediately to Buffalo because anytime Toronto has anything to do with Phoenix, they can't do anything like, oh, ever since the Roadrunners moved over here, you guys can't do anything in the playoffs. You haven't won a championship since. Anyway, so with Fisher,
yes,
he's been playing better. He has been kind of got that goal scoring back. I think even as someone like as the meme, oh, I can't trash talk anymore. Like he's literally 42 games this year. He has 15 points. That's 5 more than last year. 3 more goals, 2 more assists. He's got it back. He's playing with some more swagger. He's still providing the good bottom 6 stuff you need. I'd say probably a 2-year contract. You could do a 1, but I'd say give him a 2-year contract. He's probably going to be $1.5 million. You're not going to get a huge pay bump, but you give him a pay bump.
Yeah, I think that you got to keep Fisher at this point. There was a lot of question marks on whether he was going to stay or if he was going to go. I like what I see with Jack McBain and Christian Fisher. And from what I'm seeing so far with Jack McBain, I don't see him being a top 6 player. I think with all the skill that this team's going to be,
fill in the third.
Yeah,
that's what Jack McBain is.
with all the skill that this team is getting in the next few years, the young talent that they're going to be infusing into this team, I don't see Jack McBain ever going to be touching the top 6, and that's fine. He does a role and he plays it well, and I think that we finally have found a good line mate for Christian Fisher. You know, I think that those two really do play very well together. And then whoever you want to toss in on that third position, whether it's O'Brien or whoever, you know, that tandem works really well together. And if you're going to keep McBain around, I think you keep Christian Fisher around as well.
And the thing with Fisher is, yes, he still has a bit of stone hands. Not quite as bad as Bissonnette, but he still has a bit of stone hands. But he also... not in the same degree as Krause, because him and I said it for the longest time, him and Krause were the same player, but Krause just had a better NHL shot. Fisher is really doubled down on that bottom 6 persona, and I think he's flourished, like actually doubling down on that. And McBain, him and McBain, while they're not going to give you 50 points a year or anything, they play well. They get down to the dirty areas. They can get those rebound garbage goals. They provide good depth scoring. Both of them are about...
and he's
10 to 12, 13 goal guys. That's great for your third, fourth line.
He's finally on the wing, too. I can't believe it drove me nuts last year that they were trying him out at center. It's like this. I'm sorry, Fisher is not a center. Stop trying to put him in.
He needed Jack McBain. Jack McBain
you're putting
Christian Fisher.
Yeah, you're putting a square peg in a round hole. Stop. Like, it's just, he's not a center. But with Jack McBain, I think that he finally is unlocking his potential, and we're seeing that with the success that he's had offensively. He's been doing quite well. You know, he had a breakaway goal this week between our shows. Like he's done well. Fisher's done pretty well.
And it's really good to see him and McBain both combining for those good depth points. It's worked. It's been good. Fisher's great in the locker room. Obviously, like there was that meme where, you know, I was saying where you had him, Keller, and Schmaltz show up to that first Tempe hearing, and I'm like, all right, well, Fisher can stay as long as he wants now, but he's actually showing those improvements on the ice as well. Yeah. And after years of regression, years of it's looking like get rid of this guy, he's found his spot and flourished, and it's great. Like I'm loving his play right now.
Mm-hmm.
Keep him 2-year contract, maybe 2.125 or whatever, depending on like if you want to put like some bonuses or whatever. Keep him 1 to 2 years. I have no problems at all with that. And you might see it as a slight overpayment for the bottom 6, sure, but it's slight overpayment before any of these kids need contracts is not a bad thing. It keeps
if it's an overpayment in a 3-year period, I'm perfectly fine with it. I think the Coyotes can overpay on a lot of guys within the 3-year period, and that's perfectly fine. They can absolutely do that because once again, this is not the time where we have any big contracts coming up. It's after that 3-year period when, once again, Cooley, Geeky, Gunner potentially. Oh no, Gunner's already exhausted.
Yeah, Gunner will need a contract. In 2 years,
exhausted
but
1
it's
year.
still
But
the 2 to 3 year window. Like it's still whoever we draft this year. Like you're completely right there. And just to kind of keep it going a little bit with the forwards. So keep Fisher, Bukestad. I would love to keep him. That he would be a phenomenal bottom 6 veteran guy. The problem is he has really flourished playing those top 6 minutes.
He's played well.
If you get a second for him, you move him, or even a third. That's still a free asset. You sign him as a free agent, $900K. You wouldn't need to retain any contending team. Would love a guy that you're going to play in the bottom 6, but if we get an injury, you can come right in and look how he's played, just to take a peek at his stats. And I'm like, hey, you could trade him now because of how well he's playing. Right now, he has 10 goals, 8 assists, 18 points in 42 games. Last year, in 57 with the Wild, 7 goals, 6 assists, 13 points. He's showing he can still play that top 6, minimum middle 6 role. He'll get interest. A lot of reason I keep saying second round pick is because a lot of these assets are going to be rentals for these teams. Most of them aren't going to be willing to give up very many prospects, but second and third round picks for whatever reason are kind of seen as not as good. So you kind of get a lot of teams off guard with them. But that might be changing with how many second round picks the Coyotes have. In 2025 or 2024?
Yes, they've got a lot, and I think that. Bukestad definitely is getting traded at the deadline, but he's played really well with Austin Krause and Matthias Michelli before he was injured. I think that line has been a little bit weaker having Gunner on it. Personally, I think that Krause has been the scorer and Gunner's just kind of tagging along. He hasn't really found that natural passing ability. He's got a really good shot. Gunner, he has a really good shot, but he's still learning a lot in the NHL, whereas Michelli looked a lot more NHL ready with that pass. And when you have a guy like Krause, who you could just keep feeding for goal after goal, I really think that line was set up really well, and that injury definitely hurt that whole line. So,
do you want to know who they remind me of? Honestly, I don't say this lightly. Michelli is basically Ray Whitney. Light, Ray Whitney is a legend, but with how well he is passing, and Krause is his Verbata. Verbata was also a good passer, and whenever Ray Whitney left, Verbata even said, I want to be more of the setup guy, which Connor Garland did the exact same thing when he lost his setup man, and it usually leads to less production overall, unfortunately. But when you have Krause
we can take it
your finisher.
We can take it one step further. Nick Bukestad's 6'6". You got Martin Hansel down the middle, right?
Yep.
There you go.
What Martin Hansel 6'8" or something stupid? He was tall. He was a big boy. He was a Bill Armstrong pick before Bill Armstrong. But they filled these exact same roles, and Krauser is your finisher. And the fact that he's able to just work on his shot, he doesn't have to force bad passes, and Michelli is a really natural passer. Gunner is great. I feel like Gunner and Michelli would be better than Krause and Michelli. Nothing against Lawson Krause, but it would also hurt Krause and probably the team as a whole. I really want Gunner with Keller. Gunner, Keller, Hayton, I think could be a phenomenal line. I know you still have Schmaltz. Part of the reason I want to trade Schmaltz is because the injury stuff, plus I just feel like other players are going to be better, but I also know he's buddy-buddy with Keller, and you don't want to ruin that. But I just feel like Gunner is the guy you want with a guy like Keller, because while Keller can score, he still has that phenomenal pass. Barrett Hayton, phenomenal pass, where Gunner and Krause aren't really compatible because they're both kind of the same. Gunner is much better with the breakout speed. He's better with his handles. He has that natural killer instinct where he gets the puck and you know he's going to score. It was that goal. Was it against San Jose? It was one of the last home games, and everyone on Twitter, one of my mutuals, Major Nelson, was like, you could see it in that kid's eyes. The second he got on the ice, he was going to score. That is phenomenal. It's not good with Krause. Michelli and him work phenomenally. And
two different shots too. Two different shots. Gunner has that new age springy, snappy shot, that really deceptive, springy shot, whereas Krause just kind of forces it in. He's a it's fast, but it's not as deceptive. It's just a hard shot, a hard wrist shot, and two different shots. So I'm curious to see how that would work out, putting that with Michelli and seeing the overall
I think
the overall
could be
production.
Even better, or it could be a little bit about the same. But no matter what, I still see it having high potential.
I think right now it wouldn't probably be nearly as successful having Gunnar with Michelli, and the reason I say that is I still think that Gunnar is too undersized for this league. It just looks so apparent that he's a 19-year-old playing with men, and he is a 19-year-old
Give him a couple
playing
years,
with men.
he'll get that muscle up. But I know what you're saying. Like he looks pretty like. Even I was talking to a coworker of mine about Josh Doan, and it's like, you know, he looks just like his dad. But my coworker commented, "Yeah, but he's just really skinny." And I'm like, "Yeah." And it's the very same concept. I think Donor is 20, so he's a little bit older than Gunther. But you know, as these kids are hitting their grown adult bodies, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, mature bodies.
Weird, but you know, their mature bodies. You know, like you could tell the 30-year-old versus the 19-year-old that was playing with mostly kids. So give it a couple of years. I think those issues will definitely kind of subside. But also, Michelli's have more years to get that mature body as well. So it also makes sense why him and Krause be playing as well together. And speaking of Michelli, this kid, I'll stand by it. If it was up to me right now, before this injury, and the injury doesn't really make me think, oh, he's going to be bad or anything, but 30 games, 3 goals, 19 assists, 22 points, an improvement from last year's 23 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. He played well for a stretch, and then me and you both agreed he got out-muscled. This year, from the moment training camp started, it was with his play, obviously not with, like, I didn't hear any words, I didn't see him jawing or anything, but with his play, he essentially looks Turnier in the eye and Bill Armstrong in the eye like, you are not sending me down. Yep. I am making this team, and it's phenomenal. This kid is good. He is Connor Garland with more skill, and he's faster and a better passer and does have a better shot. I love Garland. This is not me attacking Garland. I'm just trying to take a player that I like, that we all know is good, and make that logical comparison to be like, this kid is just better. Now, I think Garland, again, better finisher, though.
I think it's interesting because they're very, very similar players. The only difference I see is that Garland was better at saucer passing, whereas Michelli doesn't do nearly as much saucer passing. He likes to just make a really hard, quick, accurate pass. And it's deadly accurate. You know, he has been able to finish a lot of plays off with just how well he's able to make that pass through sticks, through feet, whatever it needs to be to get to the other side.
Mm-hmm. He's good. He's good.
Yep.
22, so he'll be 23 next year. I know the injury. I know that, and I was talking with, again, an unnamed individual in the mullet, and I'm like, the best thing about guys like Michelli and Geeky, and I like both of them. Again, this is not a, you know, screw these guys, is when we start making playoffs or we start making runs, if they're the odd man out, you can trade them for what you need. So it's like you do need to be a little careful. As much as I love Michelli, does he fully fit into this core? Because the problem is, in a middle 6 role, you're going to get limited success with him. In a top 9 role, depending on where he's at, limited success. Top 6, he will flourish. And if you have him and Krause as your third line pair, as a scoring third line, that could look really good. It just depends on how you balance out minutes and matchups and whatnot. That could be a really deadly finishing off your top 9.
It's gonna be really tricky because when I said McBain worked really well with Christian Fischer, I think Michelli works really well with Lawson Krause. And the interesting thing is that GMBA has committed a lot of money to Lawson Krause to be, I think, a second line winger. If I were to make that opinion. But with that being said, the Coyotes could have as many as 3 players next year moving into that, fighting for that top 6 role. In, you know, potentially a Fantilli or Bedard, or Gunnar and Cooley. Like those 3 guys alone are all going to be fighting for top 6 ice. And I don't know where you put them. You know, I just don't know where you fit them. And that, as much as I like Michelli and I like him a lot, I could see Michelli potentially becoming trade bait in that sense that they just don't have enough room for him. And somebody's going to look at that player and go, he's a damn good player. I can get something for him.
And it's like, and again, best case scenario, that's your scoring third line. That means you have one of the best top 9s in the league. Because as long as they're playing together and they still get like decent minutes, they're still going to produce. But also with the difference in minutes and whatnot, you also don't really want to be able to be like, oh, hey, well, the production is that much lower because Michelli works really well in the top 6, but he also works really well with Krause. Where Michelli, I'd give him a 6 to 8 year contract right now. I know the injury. I know you have to be more conservative. You have to be more smart about it. But I love this kid. But at the same time, I also am factoring in. I'm looking at this. He might be an odd man out because you're not moving Keller. I love Keller. All right. And if you're telling me you could trade Keller for Austin Matthews, sure. But we're not talking about that unrealistic trade. We're talking about realistic options. And Schmaltz is here. They're not getting rid of him. Maybe in 2024 they buy him out. Worst case scenario, if they really want to make space, which means he's still here for at least 2 more years. So okay, he has a spot with Keller no matter what. So you're not going on the first line. Krause and Michelli play so well together, but then where are you going to fit Gunnar? Okay, well maybe you can move down Schmaltz. Well, you're not doing that. So Gunnar has to fit somewhere on the second line. So then you keep bumping Michelli down. He's probably the odd man out. Not this year, maybe not even next year, but eventually. So maybe you give him between a 3 and 5 year contract. You try to get him at a good cap hit, so that way that contract can be moved for trade bait. Because hey, that'll be a good value contract for someone. Or maybe you try to do like a 2 year bridge deal. Because I think you were leaning heavily on a 2 year bridge, but with how good he is, I wouldn't mind that multi-year. But I do acknowledge the injury right now. We have to make sure it doesn't have any long-term effects. You don't want to have a situation where, we can't move this contract, and then you lose Logan Cooley or something, which you wouldn't. You'd have to move something else. But I understand that with a guy like that, with how good he is, we're going to love him as fans. But he's probably going to be that guy that gets traded. Every core has them. We have all these really good draft picks. Every one of these cores has 1 or 2 of those guys, and he's probably it. So probably a 2 year, $3.5 million a year. He's played really well. He'll earn that money. Like, I really feel like BA gives him a good pay bump.
I would say like a 2.5. That's where I would shoot in at. I don't think you're going to see the $3 million mark for Michelli just because of the injury. If he plays the full year, I think he absolutely does. But because of the injury, I don't see that ability, because you don't know, and that's what Armstrong will argue. He'll be like, yeah, well, what happens if you went through a slump during that injury time? You know, your numbers only look really good now because you were injured. Like, how am I supposed to know, what your projections truly are because of that injury? So I could absolutely see him reeling it back a little bit, and I could definitely see, when we talk about pieces getting thrown into trades, I could see Michelli end up getting thrown into a trade somewhere along the line in the future.
But that's probably going to be either for, hey, we're moving up exponentially in the draft, or, hey, we need a top 4 defenseman. We need a right shot guy, or we need that second line center. It would be, we're getting something, or even a goalie. Like, we're getting this specific thing that we need, so we're going to move on from Michelli. That's the way. Like, that's the only scenario I see him being moved. Yeah, because he's extra.
So let's say like Shane Gostisbehere gets you like a first this year with 50% retainment, gets you a first. It's the Colorado Avalanche, right? And the Colorado Avalanche make it to 29th in the draft, right? Could I see, the 29th and Matthias Michelli getting packaged to move up to like top 15? Yeah, I could. I could see a trade like that happening.
Depending on, again, who, hey, X player is going to move up to this spot. Hey, where's Gunnar going to play? Hey, like, again, just when you're looking at how the team's constructed, that's just how GMs are going to have to look at it. And that doesn't mean, again, that we don't want Michelli, get rid of him. It just means that with how good he's been, we now finally have, after that, and I said it, I stand by it, they were going to be fine with 1 year of bad prospects and then restocking the cupboards. BA did a phenomenal job, and he's still doing a phenomenal job. And I know this is a Chaika pick, but it's still, he's restocking everything else to the point where a guy like Michelli can be someone you trade, and that was a 4th-round asset.
Yep.
If you're getting even a first-round asset from Michelli, that is a huge return on investment. And again, don't force it. He's not on the market. This is just, looking in the future. And then in the future, Jack McBain, 23 years. He's bottom 6, so you're... Look, I don't mind a multi-year contract depending on the cap hit, because you can lock in your bottom 6. Yeah. But you also, what's that cap hit going to be? So I think we both agreed, was it a 2-year bridge, or not a 2-year bridge, but a 2-year, like, $3 million contract for him?
I say whatever you year-wise are giving to Fisher, I think you give to McVay. I think you just line them up together, and that you use the buddy system, and you do that. As for money, I don't see it being too crazy. I would say like $2 million if I were to be a betting
you wouldn't
man.
give him 1.5 a year?
1.5 per year?
Yeah, that's why I said 2-year, $3 million contract, so it's 1.5 per year.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, 1.5, 2 million, somewhere in there. I'd put money on that. I don't think it's gonna be.
We also can overpay a little bit for the bottom 6 if it's a 2-year that's not an issue. So it's like, again, if it sounds like these numbers are a little inflated, we can afford to treat our bottom 6 guys a little better right now.
Remember, like our commenter said, we are going to have $20 million in cap space that we need to spend, or we get penalized. That's not 20 million to the top. That's 20 million that we have to spend in order to not get penalized. And I think that rolls perfectly into, let's just quickly run over how you get to that extra 20 million and talk about the UFAs that are coming up this year. So we are approaching the end of this podcast. I want to reel us in real quick here because we are over the hour mark, but I want to talk about this because it's really important. And that's that this year has a pretty stacked UFA class of players that absolutely are not going to find homes this year, because guess what? The cap space probably isn't going to go up all that much. Definitely not enough to get big name players like, let's just say, a Bo Horvat. I don't see a guy like that getting a big contract on any playoff team, because guess what? Those playoff teams are all at or near the cap ceiling. I think it's 22 teams are out of cap space, right? So it's getting pretty bad when it comes to cap space for those teams. And there's going to be a big ticket guy out there that, GMBA may end up spending some money on to bring in and teach the rookies and the younger players how to be NHLers. Just some names out there, right? We have Bo Horvat, but there's also guys like Max Pacioretty. He might be a guy. He might, recede back a little bit. He's not going to be as big and dominant of a player. But if you look at, let's say Joel Pavelski and what he's done with the Dallas Stars and how that team has grown with those young players and how the Jason Robertsons have become just incredibly dominant, that all comes from the veteran leadership, like a guy like Joe Pavelski has been teaching those kids. That leadership is just completely invaluable. It's something that any rebuilding team needs. And now that we've kind of hit the floor, the attempt to win should start happening next year. And with that attempt, I think that's when you bring in an older veteran player that's absolutely not going to get a contract on any good team next year. So with, once again, needing to spend cap up to the cap, needing to spend, right? I'm sure we'll take on a couple more bad contracts. We always do. It's the meme of the NHL. The Coyotes are the garbage contract kings. It is what it is, but in reality, you're going to see a lot of these older players moving on. There's a couple other names here. There's James Van Riemsdyk, Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko's up this year. Even I don't see this happening. I really don't. But even Dylan Larkin's a UFA this year, 26 years old, centerman. He could be a guy that you could slot in with Lawson Krause, and that could be a really dangerous second line. I think that you'd still probably need to move on some people. I could see potentially maybe a Barrett Hayden or a Michelli, guys like that probably getting traded if you were to pick up a Dylan Larkin. But it's something that could absolutely happen. Now, is it going to happen? I doubt it. I think Detroit will get it figured out. The Steve Yzerman is a wizard among men, so I doubt that he's going to let his most important piece and his captain of his team walk to free agency, but could happen. There's also the other option that you just kind of pick up like a few veterans to just kind of kick it down the road and prepare for next year's UFA, where you're going to potentially get one Austin Matthews, and that's where you can spend a lot of your money on. There's guys out there that you can pick up that are veterans like Jordan Stahl off of Carolina. He's a guy who could absolutely be a veteran that knows how to win in the league and can do it the right way. Another guy you can pick up is like Jason Zucker off of Pittsburgh, who's going to be a UFA, and that team is absolutely not going to be able to afford to re-sign him. You put him in that leadership role, he absolutely could mentor the younger guys. I think that's ultimately what you end up doing to get to the cap floor. And it's not going to be pretty. I still think that you're going to see a lot of bad contracts coming the other way. It is what it is. When you take on a bad contract, if you don't know how that works, that contract goes to LTIR, and LTIR, you only have to spend 10% of that money. The rest is insured by the insurance agency. So, it's a great tool for an owner to save some dollars while they're in a rebuild. I'm sure our owner definitely doesn't mind, Brian Little and Andrew Ladd on LTIR. Currently, that's $10 million that he's not spending. He's only spending $1 million on those two players. So you could see that end up happening where a couple more bad contracts come back the other way to Arizona, allowing us to get to the cap floor while also only spending 1/10 of the dollars.
Sorry about that. I was brutally
actual
murdering
money.
my dog and my wife.
Oh, okay. Hello. I kept it riding, so I hope you enjoyed, people. I'm hoping that they didn't notice that you disappeared.
So anyway, Bo Skorvac confirmed. I'm pretty sure Richie did a phenomenal job without me talking about all that. But I want to go ahead and look at the 2024 real quick. No, not Austin Matthews, but you have guys like Kopitar, Stamkos, Aho, Voracek, Blake Wheeler, Elias Pettersson, Sam Reinhart, Hellebuck. It goes on and on and on. This is not me saying any of these guys are coming here, except for Austin Matthews. Here's what I am saying. Teams that want to extend these guys are going to need to get rid of some contracts. And the Coyotes are not going to be playoff bound for at least another, probably 3 years. They might be sniffing the playoffs the next couple, but they will not be in the playoffs. So it's like, we can still take on some of these bad contracts. Oh, you want to extend, you want to keep, Steven Stamkos, Tampa Bay? Okay. What bad contracts you got? And what nice little prospects are you going to toss our way? So that way we can make this work. You scratch my back, I scratch yours, I break your kneecaps and take your draft picks. That's how GMBA runs this ship. So you got to keep looking at it for the next couple of years, because while we still can, I'm just going to use Bo Horvat because I love Bo Horvat. He's not going to be a 50-goal scorer his entire career. It's a career year, but 30 goals scorer, that'd be solid. I would not mind if we could try to bag him for a year, some inflated contract, a $9 or $10 million cap hit. You flip him at the deadline. Or the plan is to flip him at the deadline, and you get a guy like that to be like, oh, you know what? This market's pretty good. I like what they're building here, and maybe you can get him to extend. Now, that doesn't mean it will happen. He likely goes to a different team, but that would also mean if he goes to a different team, how's that team going to get cap space? Oh, yeah, first going towards the Coyotes to take on some more bad contracts. I'm still looking at Florida to give us Bobrovsky. I know Spencer Knight's off the table, but I'm just saying, look, I'll take the entirety of Bob's contract if you throw in that little centerman you got there that's coming up through your system. His name's escaping me. I think it's Anton Lundell. I think it's a little known guy. Yeah.
Yep.
He's a indie band. You're not gonna know who he is.
All right. I agree with you. I think I don't think they're going to trade Lundell, but I agree with you on taking on contracts for players or for teams so that they can re-sign those free agents.
And also, again, you can rent some of these free agents. So the 2023, again, we could literally, if Bo Horvat wanted a 1-year contract, I'm just going to use him as an example, you could pay a $10 million for him for the 1 year. And you probably trade him at the deadline, or you can make him, you can try to convince him to stay moving forward. But you would have that flexibility because Vancouver can't keep him. how many teams out there actually have cap space? Because Vancouver also doesn't have cap space to re-sign him, meaning if they're going to be able to trade him right now, what are they going to be able to take back? So even if we just helped facilitate that trade, what assets would be coming to Arizona for taking on what bad contracts? So even if it isn't, again, a guy like him coming here specifically, pay attention to all these kind of different players. Pay attention to what the Coyotes can do to leverage that cap space, how we can keep getting more assets, because the rebuild is not done. They no longer need, if they get Bedard or Fantilli, even to an extent Michkov, the tank is over. But the rebuild is not. So you keep the assets rolling, you start improving that team, you start making them win more, you bring them up towards mediocrity, then you bring them up to a wild card spot, then you bring them up to top 3 in your division. So just saying, like next year, it's going to be really interesting. There's also a lot of these, even the smaller free agents, the guys that are going to make $2.5 million, $3 million, right? They're not going to have roster spots because who's going to have the cap to sign them? Oh wait, the Coyotes good. Oh wait.
Yep. All right. Well, I am going to cut us off there. I think it's about time that we hit the dusty trail and call this one a wrap. Episode 43. I think that we answered that question quite well, and I think we spent way too much time on it. But it's okay because, Coyotes fans, we don't really got much else to talk about. The hockey's pretty bad. We're on a 9-game losing streak. Aside from
9-game Bedard winning streak, it is the
9-game Bedard winning streak. Ultimately, has led to us having to talk about contracts for an hour. But it is what it is. We enjoy contract talk.
Okay, so make sure to like, comment, favorite, subscribe, say hi to Spike. Go adopt shelter dogs because they're also good boys, especially the elder dogs. Give them a chance to hang out with you to help cure your January depression or your seasonal, whatever the hell it's called. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys later.